He walked away like I meant nothing to him. It's a sentence I think most of us have felt, in one way or another. A sentence that carves a hollow space right below your ribcage, a place where your self-worth used to live. It's not just a physical sensation. It's an ontological crisis, a fundamental questioning of your place in the universe. That hollow space becomes a void that echoes with every unanswered question, every memory that now feels like evidence in a trial where you've been found guilty of the crime of being insufficient. It's a uniquely Western kind of tragedy, I think, wrapped in the mythology of the rugged individual, the person who is unencumbered, who moves on. We're taught to admire the clean break, the person who doesn't look back. We see it in our films, our music, our literature. The hero walking off into the sunset, alone and complete. The cowboy riding into the distance. The adventurer boarding the ship to new horizons. The protagonist who sheds relationships like old skin, emerging stronger, more focused, more asterisk themselves asterisk. We romanticize the leaver, the one who has the courage to pursue their authentic path, even if that path leads away from us. But we are never taught how to be the one left standing in the dust, watching that sunset claim someone you thought was your entire sky. There are no hero's journey narratives for the abandoned, no epic poems for those who stay, no wisdom traditions that celebrate the profound courage it takes to wake up the next morning, when the person who made morning meaningful has decided you are not worth their dawn. For me, it happened on a Tuesday. Isn't that always the way? The world doesn't end on a dramatic, stormy Saturday night, with thunder providing the soundtrack to your heartbreak and rain mixing indistinguishably with your tears. No, the world ends on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, with the sun shining with almost offensive brightness and the birds committing the cosmic offense of still chirping, as if the universe hadn't just fundamentally restructured itself around your absence from someone's life. I remember the weather with painful clarity. It was 72 degrees. There was a light breeze coming off the ocean, the kind that feels like a caress that makes you glad to be alive. The irony was not lost on me, that nature would choose such a beautiful day for my personal apocalypse. The sky was that particular shade of blue that belongs in paintings, cloudless and infinite. Children were playing in the distance, their laughter carried on that same breeze. An elderly couple walked past us, holding hands, their fingers intertwined with the casual intimacy of decades. I remember thinking, will we be them someday? Will our hands find each other with that same unconscious certainty when we're 70? The answer, it turned out, was waiting just moments away. We were on the pier, the one we'd walked down 100 times, maybe more. I'd stopped counting after a while. That's what happens with rituals of love. They become so woven into the fabric of your life that you stop marking them as special. They become the baseline, the ordinary magic that you assume will always be there. The wood was worn smooth by a million footsteps just like ours. Generations of lovers and families and solitary walkers all leaving their invisible mark. I used to find that comforting, the idea that we were part of a continuum, that our love was adding its small chapter to the long story of this place. Now, I suppose we were adding a different kind of chapter, the ending kind. The salt spray was a taste on the air we used to share. I can still taste it now whenever I close my eyes and return to that moment, which I do, despite myself, more often than I'd care to admit. It's strange how sensory memories work, how they can transport you back to a moment with such visceral completeness that you almost believe you could change the outcome if you just made different choices this time through. And he said, well, it doesn't really matter what he said, does it? The vocabulary of a breakup is surprisingly limited. It's not you, it's me. I need to find myself. We want different things. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. You deserve someone better. I need to focus on my career/mental health/personal growth. It's all just semantic noise, a smokescreen for the one brutal, untranslatable truth. I am leaving and you are staying. But I remember fragments despite myself. He told me I was wonderful. He told me this wasn't about anything I'd done or failed to do. He told me he cared about me, would always care about me. He used the past tense without seeming to notice, already relegating me to memory even as I stood before him. Still warm, still breathing, still hoping that this was a nightmare from which I would momentarily wake. I think I said something. I must have, but I don't remember what. My voice seemed to be coming from very far away, like I was speaking underwater. I might have cried, I might have begged, I might have stood there in silence, struck dumb by the sheer impossibility of what was happening. Memory has the mercy of blurring the most humiliating moments, even as it crystallizes the ones that cut deepest. But it wasn't the words. Words are cheap, easy, malleable. Words can be taken back, reinterpreted, softened with time. It was the walk. He turned and he walked. And it wasn't a hesitant walk, a walk that hoped for a callback, a walk that left a door open a crack. It wasn't the walk of someone conflicted, someone still tethered by doubt or affection or even basic human empathy. It was a walk of pure, unadulterated finality. His shoulders didn't slump with the weight of it. They seemed to straighten as if relieved of a burden, and I was that burden, me, the person who had loved him with every atom of my being, the person who had rearranged my entire life to accommodate his dreams, his schedules, his moods. I had become weight, encumbrance, something to be set down and walked away from. I stood there, how long? Seconds, minutes, time had become elastic and meaningless, watching him recede. With every step he took, the space between us wasn't just growing in physical feet and inches. It was becoming a philosophical chasm, a gulf not of distance but of meaning. On one side was the person he had been with me, the one who held my hand during a scary movie, who knew I couldn't sleep without background noise, who knew how I took my coffee 2 sugars, a splash of cream, stirred exactly 10 times, who whispered secrets into my hair in the dark, who traced patterns on my back when I couldn't sleep, who made me laugh until I couldn't breathe, who had seen me at my absolute worst and had told me I was still beautiful. On the other side was the person he was now, becoming more himself with each step away from me. A man for whom I had already ceased to exist, not as a person. I'm sure I still existed to him in the abstract, but as a relevant factor in his decisions, his life, his future. I was a ghost he had successfully exorcised simply by turning his back. The power of that gesture, to unmake someone's entire world by the simple act of walking away, felt both terrible and awesome in the old sense of that word, inspiring awe, inspiring terror. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to collapse right there on the pier and become part of the wood, worn down by time and weather, until I was as smooth and unremarkable as everything else. I wanted the earth to open up and swallow me. I wanted to wake up. I wanted to rewind time. I wanted to be anyone, anywhere else. But I just stood there, frozen, watching the distance between us grow from feet to yards to something insurmountable, watching him become smaller, less defined, less real, watching him turn from the person I loved into a silhouette and then into a memory and then into an absence, and in that moment I felt it, the nothingness. He walked away like I meant nothing to him, and the terrifying part was the dawning realization that in the narrative of his life, in that moment, I did mean nothing. Not in the sense that our time together had been meaningless. He might reminisce fondly someday, might tell future partners about someone I dated once, but in the only sense that truly matters, I was not sufficient reason to stay. I was a closed chapter, a song he'd skipped, a town he'd driven through and forgotten. My love, my memories, the future I had painted with him in every brushstroke. It was all rendered null and void by the simple, brutal physics of his departure. Love, I realized, is not a democracy. It's not enough for one person to feel it, to nurture it, to build their entire existence around it. It requires unanimous consent, and his vote had just come in. No, veto, motion denied, and in our system, in the system we've all agreed to, the person who wants less gets to decide. The person who loves less holds all the power. The person who can walk away does. The day that followed were a study in existential whiplash, a crash course in the malleability of reality itself. I discovered that time could move in multiple directions simultaneously, forward into a future I didn't recognize, backward into a past I was now being forced to reinterpret, and somehow stuck. Paralyzed in that Tuesday afternoon when everything ended, my mind became a prison of two warring realities, two competing universes that could not coexist but somehow did, tearing me apart in the process. There was reality A, the one built over years, a cathedral of shared experiences. The time we drove to the coast with the windows down, singing off key to terrible pop songs, not caring that we couldn't hit a single note correctly because the joy was in the trying, in the laughing, in the way we'd look at each other during the chorus and feel like we were the only two people in the world who understood what that song really meant. The time he surprised me at work with lunch because he knew I'd been stressed, and we ate terrible deli sandwiches in my car, and it felt like the best meal I'd ever had because of the intention behind it. The way he'd bring me tea exactly at 3 p.m. because he knew I hit a slump, the mug always prepared exactly right, and he'd kiss the top of my head as he set it down, and I'd feel cared for in a way I'd never experienced before. The private language of our jokes, the way a single raised eyebrow across a crowded room could speak volumes. The way we could have entire conversations without words, our own sign language of glances and gestures that no one else could decode. The names we called each other that would sound ridiculous to anyone else, but to us were terms of deepest endearment. The stories we told about each other, mythology we'd built around our relationship, the meet cute we'd embellished until it was half fiction, the disasters we'd survived together that had become funny in retrospect, the dreams we'd shared in the dark about the life we'd build together. This reality was solid, textured, real. It had weight and substance. I had the photos, hundreds of them, cataloged chronologically in my phone, a visual archive of our love. I had the ticket stubs from every movie we'd seen together, saved in a shoebox like they were precious artifacts. I had the birthday cards with his handwriting, the I love you in blue ink that now felt like a forgery, like evidence that had been falsified. I had the neural pathways to prove it, the way my brain had rewired itself around him, the way certain songs or places or smells would trigger an automatic thought of *him*, the way my first instinct for any news, good or bad, was to tell *him*. This reality insisted on its own truth. It had happened. It was real. We had been real. Then there was reality B, the reality his walk had created. In this reality, none of that mattered. Or rather, it had mattered, perhaps in its moment, the way a beautiful sunset matters, lovely while it lasts, but not something you turn around for once you've moved on. Our cathedral was a sandcastle, and the tide of his indifference had come in, and the ocean doesn't care about the hours you spent building, the care you took with every detail, the love you poured into every tower and wall. The ocean takes it all back, indifferent, relentless. In this reality I was nothing, a placeholder, a temporary occupant of a space in his life that was always meant to be vacant. The warm body in the bed before the right body came along, the person who filled the time before he figured out what he really wanted, the training wheels before the real ride, the rough draft before the final manuscript. Every shared memory I treasured, he had apparently filed away under past relationship. A folder he could close and archive and not need to access again except perhaps when drunk and nostalgic at 2 a.m., and even then probably not for long. The future we'd planned, the trips we'd talked about, the apartment we were going to get together, the life we were going to build, had been deleted from his calendar, those dates freed up for other opportunities, other people, other futures that didn't include me. How do you reconcile that? How do you hold the weight of a shared universe in one hand and the absolute, airy nothingness of its cancellation in the other? It's a psychological crisis that feels deeply philosophical, touching on questions that have plagued thinkers for millennia. What is the nature of reality? What makes something real? If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it make a sound? If a love was so profound to one person and so disposable to the other, did it exist at all? It forces you to question the very nature of reality itself. If a love so vivid to me, so central to my understanding of myself and the world, could be so disposable to him, then what is love but a subjective hallucination? Was our entire relationship a shared dream from which only he had woken up? Was I still asleep, still dreaming, still believing in something that had already been revealed as illusion? I found myself engaging in the most painful form of revisionist history, going back through every moment we'd shared and trying to see it through his eyes. That time he said he loved me. Did he mean it? Or was he just saying what he thought he should say? That time he held me while I cried. Was he genuinely moved by my pain? Or was he just performing the role of boyfriend, checking a box? Every "I love you" suddenly came with a question mark. Every intimate moment became suspect, possibly staged, possibly hollow. I became an archaeologist of my own relationship, digging through the ruins looking for the crack, the flaw, the moment when it all started to go wrong. There had to be signs I'd missed. There had to be warnings I'd ignored, because the alternative, that this was sudden, that everything was fine until it wasn't, that love could just evaporate like water under a hot sun, was too terrifying to contemplate. It meant that nothing was safe. It meant that everything was always potentially ending, and you'd never know until it was too late. I wandered through my own life like a ghost haunting a house she used to live in. Everything was familiar but wrong, like when you return to your childhood home and find that new owners have repainted all the walls and none of the rooms are the way you remember them. I'd pick up a book we'd read together and half expected to find his marginalia, his thoughts woven into the text, the conversations we'd had about themes and characters recorded in the margins. But the pages were blank, mute, offering no explanation. I'd hear a song, our song, one of many, and my body would brace for the shared smile, the squeeze of my hand, the way we'd lock eyes and communicate everything without saying a word. But there was only silence, only me, only the song playing to an audience of one. He had been a co-author of my story for so long, and now he had dropped the pen, leaving me with a half-finished sentence and a narrative that no longer made sense. Plot had been building toward something, toward us together, toward the future we'd planned. And then suddenly the writer had changed and all the foreshadowing meant nothing, and the trajectory of the story had shifted completely, and I was a character in a novel that had lost its way. I stopped being able to think in singular terms. Every "I" came with an asterisk, a footnote that read, "Formerly we." I couldn't go to our favorite restaurant, my favorite restaurant, did I even know anymore, without seeing the ghost of him across the table. I couldn't watch our shows, my shows, without feeling the phantom weight of his head on my shoulder. I couldn't sleep on my side of the bed without being acutely aware of the emptiness of his side, the way the sheets stayed cold where they should have been warm. This is the core of the Western heartbreak, I think, the particular flavor of agony that our culture serves up. We are raised on the cult of the individual, on the myth of the self-made person, on the idea that you are complete unto yourself. Your happiness is your own responsibility. You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. It's Ralph Waldo Emerson and self-reliance, and every motivational poster that's ever told you that the only person you need is yourself. It's a powerful, empowering idea, until it's used as a weapon against you, until someone exercises their right to pursue their own happiness straight away from you, and you're left holding the shattered pieces of a shared dream you weren't supposed to have built in the first place. The very culture that told you to be independent also sold you the fairy tale of the one. The idea that you were incomplete without your other half, that true love meant merging your life with someone else's. And then when that merger falls apart, that same culture tells you that you were foolish for ever believing you needed anyone else, that you should have been more self-sufficient, less emotionally dependent. We're taught to be captains of our own ships, but no one teaches you how to sail when your first mate has jumped overboard and taken the compass with him. No one prepares you for the loneliness of solo navigation when you'd gotten used to charting courses together. No one tells you how to relearn solitude after you've grown accustomed to constant companionship. The advice comes in waves, from friends and family and the internet, All variations on the same theme: focus on yourself. This is an opportunity for growth. You don't need anyone else to be happy. The only validation you need is your own. Find yourself again. As if I'd been lost, as if loving him had been a form of disappearance rather than, in its moment, the most found I'd ever felt. I tried to do what all the articles and the well-meaning friends said. I tried to focus on myself, whatever that meant. I tried to find my passion, to rediscover old hobbies, to treat myself. I got a haircut, as if changing my appearance could change how I felt. I rearranged my apartment, as if moving furniture could shift the architecture of my grief. I downloaded dating apps and then deleted them within hours, nauseated by the thought of explaining myself to someone new, of packaging my personality into a clever bio, of pretending to be whole when I felt like a collection of broken pieces barely held together. It felt like trying to build a fire with wet wood. Myself felt like a foreign country I had neglected for years, left unvisited while I'd been busy being part of an us. I didn't know its customs or its language anymore. I'd forgotten what I liked to do when left to my own devices. I'd forgotten what music I listened to before I started listening to his music. I'd forgotten what I liked to eat when I wasn't considering his preferences. I'd forgotten who I was when I wasn't being his girlfriend. My passion had been him, our life, our plans. My hobby had been us. My self-improvement had been oriented toward being better for him, for us, for the future we were building. And now all of that effort felt wasted, misdirected, like I'd been training for years for a race that had been canceled without anyone telling me. I was an archaeologist sifting through the ruins of my own identity, trying to find the bones of the person I was before I loved him. Who was I at 20 before we met? What did I care about? What made me laugh? What did my days look like? I tried to remember and found that the memories were faded, worn like photographs left too long in sunlight. That person felt impossibly distant, impossibly young, impossibly naive. I couldn't go back to being her even if I wanted to. That door was closed, and that was the turning point, though I didn't recognize it as such in the moment. It happened not in a dramatic epiphany, not in a moment of clarity where the heavens opened and understanding poured down. It happened in a quiet, weary moment of surrender, in the exhaustion that comes from fighting against reality for so long that you simply don't have the energy to keep resisting. I was cleaning, mindless, automatic, the kind of task that requires just enough attention to keep you from thinking, but not so much that you can't think anyway. I found a box of old photos in the back of my closet, pre-digital era pictures from college, back when we still printed things, back when physical photographs were how we documented our lives. I was looking at a photograph of myself from years ago, before I knew him, before I knew he existed. I was at a party, someone's birthday maybe, or graduation, or just one of those random gatherings that happen when you're young and time is endless, and every night feels full of possibility. In the picture, I was laughing, my head thrown back, my eyes crinkled at the corners, my mouth wide open in what was clearly a moment of genuine, unself-conscious joy. My hair was different, order, styled in a way I'd never wear it now. My clothes were different, a dress I'd long since donated or lost. Even my body was different. Younger, softer, unmarked by the years that had followed, and I realized, looking at that photograph, that I didn't feel a connection to that girl. I didn't recognize her. I didn't feel like she was an earlier version of me, but rather like she was a different person entirely, someone I'd heard stories about but never met. My first reaction was pity. I looked at her, at me, and I thought, you have no idea what's coming. You are so blissfully, tragically unaware. I wanted to reach through time and warn her, don't fall so hard, don't give so much. Don't build your whole life around someone who will one day walk away like you meant nothing. Protect yourself, guard your heart, don't be so foolishly, vulnerably open. But then, a second, more profound thought followed, one that arrived with the force of revelation. But you are also whole, entirely unto yourself. That girl in the photograph didn't need his love to validate her existence. She didn't even know his love was a possibility. She had a gravity of her own, a center of mass that was located entirely within her own being. She was laughing at something, finding joy in the moment, being fully present in her own life in a way I hadn't been in years. She wasn't performing for anyone. She wasn't considering how she looked through someone else's eyes. She was just herself, complete, entire. He didn't walk away from her. He walked away from a version of me that had co-evolved with him, a version that was necessarily dependent on his presence to exist. The me that had learned to make his coffee in the morning, the me that had learned his favorite movies and books and foods, the me that had adjusted my sleep schedule to match his, the me that had suppressed certain parts of my personality that didn't mesh well with his, the me that had amplified other parts because he seemed to like them, the me that had become in so many small and large ways defined in relation to him. In leaving, he hadn't killed me. He had killed the asterisk us asterisk. And while that felt like a death, and in many ways it was a death, complete with grief and mourning and the whole process of letting go, it was also a release. It was the ending of a story, yes, but also the space for a new story to begin. It was the death of one version of myself and the painful, difficult, terrifying birth of another. I began the slow, meticulous work of psychic reclamation. It wasn't about getting over him. That phrase suggests a kind of hurdle you jump over and then continue running, unchanged by the experience. It was about gently, painfully disentangling my soul from his, a process that felt a bit like performing surgery on myself without anesthesia. I had to find every thread of myself, worth I had woven into the fabric of our relationship, and pull it back, one by one, examining each thread to see if it was still strong or if it had frayed, if it was still mine or if it had somehow become his in the twining. It was exhausting work, archaeological and surgical at once. Every time I remembered a compliment he'd given me and caught myself thinking, "That's why I'm beautiful," I had to stop. I had to interrogate that thought. I had to ask, was I only beautiful because he said so? Did his gaze create my beauty, or did it merely recognize something that existed independently of him? I had to learn to look in the mirror and find myself attractive without his voice in my head confirming it. I had to rebuild my sense of my own attractiveness from the ground up, finding evidence in my own feelings, in the way strangers looked at me, in the objective assessment of features and proportions, in anything that wasn't filtered through his perception. Every time I accomplished something, finished a project at work, cooked a good meal, read a difficult book, learned something new, and my first instinct was to tell him, to share it with him, to have him reflect my achievement back to me with pride and celebration, I had to stop. I had to sit in the silence. I had to be my own audience. I had to learn to feel proud of myself without his validation, to celebrate my own victories in the privacy of my own mind. It felt hollow at first, like applauding in an empty theater. But slowly, gradually, I learned to be enough for myself. My own approval began to carry weight. I had to rebuild my social world, too. So many of my friendships had been neglected during the relationship, put on the back burner while I prioritized us. So many of our friends were actually his friends or couple friends who didn't know what to do with me as a single entity. I had to reach out to old friends, tentatively, apologetically, admitting that I'd been a bad friend, that I'd let the relationship consume too much of my time and energy. Some of those friendships couldn't be revived. Too much time had passed. Too much distance had grown. But others welcomed me back with open arms, and I learned the profound gift of friendship, of people who love you without condition, without the romantic stakes that make love so fragile. I had to rediscover my own preferences, my own tastes, the things I liked that had nothing to do with him. I had to watch movies I wanted to watch, even if they were stupid romantic comedies that he would have hated. I had to listen to music I actually enjoyed, even if it was embarrassingly mainstream or uncool. I had to eat meals that I craved, even if they were indulgent or unhealthy. I had to let myself be silly, be messy, be contradictory, be all the things I'd smoothed over in the interest of being a good partner. I had to rebuild my reality from the ground up, brick by solitary brick. And the foundation had to be this: my value is not contingent on his acknowledgement of it. My story did not end when he closed the book. It simply became a different story, a harder one, perhaps, a lonelier one, definitely. A story without the easy comfort of companionship, without the security of knowing someone is there. But it was mine, solely, utterly, irrevocably mine. I had to learn to sleep alone in a bed that felt too big. I had to learn to cook for one without it feeling sad. I had to learn to make decisions, small ones like what to watch on Netflix, large ones like career moves and where to live, without consulting anyone else. At first, this felt like burden, like unwanted responsibility. But gradually, it began to feel like freedom. I could do anything, go anywhere, be anyone. The only person I had to consider was myself. His walking away was the most profound negation I have ever experienced. It was a rejection not just of me as a romantic partner, but of the entire reality I'd built around us. It was an erasure, a deletion, a cancellation. It forced me to confront the most terrifying question. If someone who knew me so intimately could decide I wasn't worth keeping, what did that say about my worth? But in philosophy, every negation contains the seed of a new affirmation. By declaring what I was not to him, nothing, he forced me to define what I was to myself, and that, I discovered through months of painful work, was everything. I was everything to myself in a way I'd never been before. Not in a narcissistic way. Not in the sense that I believed myself to be perfect or beyond criticism. But in the sense that I became my own source of validation, my own source of comfort, my own source of joy. I learned to take myself on dates, to movies I wanted to see, to restaurants I wanted to try. I learned to enjoy my own company, to find pleasure in solitude rather than just enduring it. I learned to have long conversations with myself, working through problems and fears and dreams without needing another person to reflect them back to me. I learned that I was resilient in ways I'd never had to be, that I could survive something I'd been certain would kill me. That heartbreak, as devastating as it is not fatal. That you can feel like you're dying and still wake up the next morning and the morning after that. That grief doesn't actually destroy you. It transforms you. It forces you to become someone new, someone who has walked through fire and come out the other side scarred but standing. He walked away like I meant nothing to him, and in doing so, he gave me the most devastating gift, the absolute unbending certainty that I mean everything to me. Not in replacement of romantic love. I still want that, still hope for it, still believe it's possible. But as a foundation underneath it, as the bedrock upon which any future relationship will be built. Never again will I make someone else the center of my universe. Never again will I confuse partnership with self-erasure. Never again will I believe that I need someone else to be complete. The story we tell ourselves about love and loss is often one of victimhood. We are the ones left behind, the ones who were deemed unworthy, the ones who didn't measure up. We are the rejected, the abandoned, the forsaken, and there's truth in that story. It hurts to be left, and that hurt is valid and real and deserves to be acknowledged. But there is another story, a more terrifying and more empowering one. It is the story of realizing that the love you thought was your anchor was actually a tether, and that being cut loose, while terrifying, is the beginning of true navigation. An anchor keeps you safe, but it also keeps you in one place. A tether keeps you connected, but it also keeps you confined, and sometimes being released from those bonds, even involuntarily, even painfully, is what allows you to finally move, to grow, to become who you're meant to be. I don't believe in the narrative that everything happens for a reason, that the universe orchestrated this heartbreak for my benefit. That feels too neat, too tidy, too dismissive of the genuine pain involved. But I do believe that we can find meaning in our suffering, that we can alchemize our pain into growth, that we can use our wounds as teachers. He didn't leave me to teach me a lesson. He left me because he wanted to, because he felt he had to, because our relationship wasn't serving him in whatever way he needed to be served. His reasons were his own, and they probably had far less to do with me than my anxious mind wants to believe. People leave for 1,000 reasons, and most of them are about the lever, not the left. But his leaving did teach me. It taught me about my own strength. It taught me about self-sufficiency. It taught me about the difference between being alone and being lonely. It taught me that I can survive things I thought were unsurvivable. It taught me that my happiness cannot be outsourced, that it has to come from within, that while partners can add to our joy, they cannot be the sole source of it. It taught me to be grateful for the small things, for the friends who showed up, for the family who held me while I cried, for the strangers on the internet who shared their own stories of heartbreak and survival. It taught me that we're all walking around with these invisible wounds, that everyone you meet has lost something or someone, that shared suffering creates a kind of communion. It taught me to be present in my own life in a way I hadn't been. When you're planning a future with someone, you're always looking ahead, always living a few months or years in the future. When that future is taken away, you're forced back into the present moment. And the present moment, I discovered, contains its own kind of peace. The present moment is all we ever really have. So, to anyone sitting in the quiet after the footsteps have faded, watching the space where someone used to be, listening to the deafening silence where there used to be a voice saying, "I love you," and "Good morning," and "How was your day?" and all the small verbal scaffolding that holds a relationship together. That emptiness is not your tomb. It is not the end of your story. It is not evidence of your unworthiness or your insufficiency. That emptiness is your canvas. It's the blank page after a chapter ends. It's the silence between songs. It's the space that has been cleared for something new to grow. You get to decide what to paint on it. You get to choose what to build in that space. You get to write the next chapter and the one after that and the one after that. He gave you the silence, you get to choose the music. He left the space empty, you get to decide what fills it. He walked away, you get to choose which direction to walk next. And yes, it's terrifying. Yes, it hurts. Yes, there will be days when you want that old life back, when you'd take the tether and the anchor if it meant not being alone. That's normal, that's human. Grief is not linear, and healing is not a straight line. You'll have good days and bad days and days where you're not sure which it is. But slowly, imperceptibly, you'll notice things. You'll notice that you went a whole day without thinking about him. You'll notice that a song that used to make you cry now just makes you nostalgic. You'll notice that you're making plans for your future, your singular future, and those plans excite you. You'll notice that you're laughing more, sleeping better, feeling more like yourself or like some new version of yourself that you're still getting to know but kind of like. You'll notice that the hollow space below your rib cage, the one that was carved out the day he walked away, has begun to fill back in. Not with him. He's gone, and that's okay now, or at least it's accepted. But with you, with your own sense of self, your own sense of worth, your own sense of possibility, with all the things you are when you're not defined in relation to someone else. And one day, maybe soon or maybe years from now, you'll realize that you're okay. More than okay, you're whole, you're complete, you're standing on your own 2 feet, and you're not just surviving. You're living, you're creating, you're becoming. You'll realize that his walking away was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of a new one, a harder one, yes. One that required more of you than you thought you had to give, but also a truer one. A story where you are not the supporting character in someone else's narrative, but the protagonist of your own. The person who walked away is not in this story anymore. But you are. You are here, still standing, still breathing, still hoping, still dreaming. You are here, and that matters. You are here, and that is enough. You are here, and you mean everything to you. And that, in the end, is the only thing that really matters.